amnesty for Mexicans. Texas Katze thinks I'm one of the good ones when it comes to Mexicans. So it's very funny to engage in conversations with our cat because otherwise we don't talk to anybody else about all of these issues that are happening in place.
This is really clever. This is really clever. You actually invent a personality, a political personality for your cat, which is at odds with your own, so you can have a debate and
we have
strengthen your
debates
argument.
about gun issues, about the protesting, about absolutely everything what is going on. Katze always has to show us what her opinion is, and then we can argue with her.
Fantastic.
Texas Katze.
How you doing, Débora?
I'm okay. I just had to run and explain something to our neighbors, but yeah, sorry, I'm a bit late.
Okay. Oh, it's okay. Everything is fine. I think we're in a really relaxed mode. It's probably better. Débora had a very good point, which was on my mind yesterday, that it's probably, I mean, we want to keep this very informal. We want to keep it very casual and a conversation, as I told you, Erasmo. And even though we wanted more engagement from outside, it probably, given everything that's going on in the US right now and more broadly, good that we just have a conversation. We don't need to drown out some of the other activities that are going on. And frankly, it's making this conversation in the certainly within the pandemic and how things are changing with that, and the situation in the US to be somehow relevant and increasingly relevant with the discussion that we're having. And maybe, you know, this is a great response, a great recommendation to turn your pet into a political adversary. Learn how to talk to the other side.
Yeah, it's really difficult sometimes,
yes,
no? Like
super difficult
to have these conversations, and also hard to deal with how to, I don't know, yesterday I was like, when I saw what was going, just like my Instagram and like being like, should I share this black square? Should I not share it? Like really like stupid, simple things, but that, I don't know, there was like all these discussions, all these arguments, like people like, I got a lot of comments from like people in Mexico being like, seeing people in Mexico being like, you're sharing this thing, but like actually you don't care about the indigenous people in this country, like kind of like calling out people as hypocrites for presenting like some kind of support for this cause, and then you feel like you're just like always walking on like eggshells, like no matter, you know, like how do you, like how should I as a white person, like white Mexican, live, you know, like react, or like as a person of any color, but also, I mean, especially white people need, how are we meant to react or support, or, you know, like in this kind of situation. And I mean, for me personally, like the reason, when even before this whole thing was going on, and when we just were going through COVID, and when Nada invited us to have this kind of filming, like a video, or like, like a conversation, I just didn't really want to do like a studio visit, because I just thought, you know, like it's not really like the time to just be like showing people my work and being like, oh, look at what I make and buy it. I don't know. And yeah, I don't know. That's why I thought it would be also cool to just like have a conversation with someone who's like actually involved with these issues, and not just someone like wants to support them or thinks about them, but like who's had some experience working in that field, no?
Well, I think that I am confused with this aspect of pausing yourself entirely for the sake of a conversation. I think that we can have conversations without the need to pause yourself, because then it almost seems like we are too shallow to just think about these things in a specific way, in a specific time, when everybody's telling us to think about these issues. When on the contrary, we should be thinking about these issues maybe the entire time. And I think that people who are doing merely social media activism, people who are calling for a cause and then forget about the thing, do not necessarily are supporting the issue at hand. From my experience, one of the saddest aspects that I saw living in the United States, working with Mexican communities, being Mexican of a different kind, because what I understood is that every single aspect of being Mexican in the United States is different. There are the people who just recently arrived there that have very specific needs when they are undocumented. They are the people who just arrived there and are documented and have also different needs. There are the people who are trying to become citizens after a long residency and after long struggles, long fights, and now are ready to claim a political voice and want to get the citizenship after being kind of in the shadows with a green card for over sometimes 15 years. So every single different type of Mexican American has different needs in the United States. And some people would not take, for example, a voice like mine who comes from Mexico and is just there working seriously. But one of the things that I learned from working with these communities is that people will engage with me trying to talk about Trump immediately. Some people would even just come to me and apologize for Trump. And I thought that that was not the best approach, because both parties have very conflicted views about immigration, about Mexican immigration especially. And blaming just the top political figure on one side never really gives you a solution. What I learned is that most fights that are worth fighting for are extremely localized and are at the lowest level. Choosing your sheriff, choosing who is your alderman, choosing who is the people that are going to represent you at state level. Those are the fights that end up having an impact for people in their daily lives. You can have a president from, in that case was the Democratic Party like Obama, and still end up with tons of deportations at the end of the administration. So for me, it is important to always remember that the more local you go in a struggle and in your message and in your efforts and in your engagement, the more you're going to help people. And I have seen how there is what I feel is almost like a loss of meaning of words by attacking the current president of the United States, because people get enraged for absolutely every issue at the highest level, always claiming that this is the worst that has ever happened. And then you have another thing. And then at the end, we end up with words in the media, words in social media, words in our daily conversations that are demean the loss of any meaning. So I think that it's good that you are engaging in such a posture, Débora, as an artist. I think that localizing efforts is always a good idea on how to create a change and not always fall in this shallow aspect of just raising your voice at a specific time for a specific issue when everybody's doing the same.
Yeah, it's very, I don't know, it's just it's for me, for example, in the United States, with like Alexandria Ocasio, for example, like seeing her and seeing how she's, like the things that she's been saying, like the way she's been dealing with her social media, the way, I don't know, like I find that kind of figure very inspiring, like to have someone who came from being like a bartender and working her way up, and the way she's supporting not only Latinos or like, you know, like people of color. Like I think just like as a politician, she's some kind of sign of hope in the US. And I am politically involved myself. Like I obviously care about politics, but like as an artist, I also find it very, you know, like sometimes it can be very complicated to talk about issues when you're making a, for me at least, it's been like, I find it very complicated when like artists talk about certain issues when it's just like an illustration of the problem and it's not really like involving yourself or like in any way having an effect on what you're just illustrating, and then kind of just profiting from those illustrations of people, other people's real struggles that are a lot of the times not really even the artist struggles. So I think like, of course, like any art gesture is a political gesture, and I, of course, like I'm not saying like you shouldn't talk about these issues or like artists shouldn't, you know, try to be involved in political activism, or, but I think it's like, it's just like a matter of how you do it. And like, yeah, like I don't know, for me in a very very small way with that series of photographs that I started sharing on my Instagram and I've been selling during the self-isolation time, I was like, okay, if I'm gonna be, I'm doing this because I need some money and I want to be active and I want to have a project going on, and I also can't use my Instagram anymore as I usually did, because like it was more like a sort of diary of these kind of public spaces that are named kind of like non-places, which are these obviously unaccessible at the moment for me. And I was just kind of like, okay, how do I deal with it? So then, yeah, I came up with this idea. And then I was like, well, at least I will try to donate some of the money that I'm making to certain causes, no, like to my community, to kind of like, you know, at least like I'm not just I'm kind of being able with my own limits, because I'm, you know, like I can't really just put tons of money out of my own pocket for these causes, but like this is a way to be proactive, or yeah, like actually engaging in society instead of just yeah, like illustrating it, or yeah, making a comment on my Instagram for a day and then, or sharing this black square and then the day after, like you say. I don't know, because I've been part of a lot of in Mexico, a lot of protests, like with for example, with the students, 43 students that disappeared, and that we were all like, very, I mean, you know how it is in Mexico City, how many protests there are every every year. And then yeah, you kind of growing up, like I remember like every time I go to a protest, like you have that feeling of like, yes, like something's going to change, or like I'm hoping, and I'm not saying this to discourage people from protesting. I think that's obviously not what I'm trying to say, but
No.
you know, like what I think it's like, yeah, like we tend to like then quickly like there's something else and something else. I mean, especially right now, it's like everything that's going on is so overwhelming that it's like quickly things start, I mean, like we start forgetting about stuff like, you know, for example, I don't know, like there's also what's happening in China at the moment. I feel like a lot of people are obviously not having the, it's just, yeah, it's way too much stuff to be able to focus on every single thing that's going on.
It's
so
impossible.
it's impossible.
And,
Yeah, and we're
and
informed, but like we're informed in a very kind of this consumption kind of way, no, like media is just like dun, 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 like everything's just coming, but we are in this kind of process of acceleration where like, yeah, like one day is this thing, then the other day is this other thing. And yeah, just hope that, I mean, yeah, we'll see how this affects the elections in the US, how, yeah.
and I like two things that you mentioned. One of them was the effort of the artist to have a localized impact in the issues. I was following your self-isolation series, and I thought it was one of the things that I have to admit about you as an artist that I enjoy is how much fun you're having while you're doing your art. There is a lot of art out there that almost seems like people are, you know, putting themselves on fire and going through a level of suffering that, in my opinion, is completely unnecessary. in your art, I almost always see, and I only follow it through, a clipping of a news paper piece here and there, and so in Instagram, etc. But I love to see how much fun you're having, and that you can have a good impact, like the donations that you were doing with the self-isolation series. What I liked about the series is that you were approaching this universal aspect of self-isolation that everybody was going through, but it was also like a very privileged way of going through a crisis, which was, waking up, having your cup of coffee, working from home under your probably wonderful sheets that you have in your bed, being able to go and shop, finding, yes, empty aisles, but it was almost the the universalism of privilege that we don't get to see beyond that. But you were using it to make a donation, and also having fun in this entire process. And I enjoy that very much about most of the things that I have seen from your creation, from your authorship. The second thing that I liked that you mentioned was accelerationism. I feel like the protests that we are seeing right now are, in a way, a manifestation of accelerationist philosophy, which you are trying to get the worst out of everyone so that we can finally achieve what has been promised to us, which is a better future. And by dragging out, the worst of people in committing crimes in the street, committing crimes against each other, police against citizens, citizens against police. That is we are going through accelerationist times, and that is something that has, at least in the little accelerationist philosophy that I have read, um, promises us a better future. And I have a lot of confidence that is going to bring interesting changes when you really are dragging the worst out of people, because then you can just come back to something better.
How do you see that transpiring, Erasmo, in sort of in your area, in your field, in your expertise? What aspects of accelerationism do you see people implementing, and what do you think the initial effects might be?
I see bringing the military into the streets is something that I am not a legal scholar, but I think that's almost illegal. The military should never be used against your own citizens. It should be used abroad to defend your citizens, or defend national assets, or even national ideas.
That's actually
Um,
in the Constitution of Germany, I know for sure, and it is existing to some degree in the U.S. But it can be overruled by the president as commander in chief of the armed forces, and it seems to be
exactly, and that is what I think right now is an accelerationist practice. Um, Looting businesses beyond peaceful protests, because peaceful protests, they're all the time. I think that the societies have learned to protest and to conduct their protests in every single institutions that are available to us. Institutionalism is important. Institutions are, at the end of the day, everything that we have. We have to create new personalities, like Débora was mentioning AOC, to create new institutions, to find new ways to express ourselves. But at the end of the day, we have institutions. And when you see people from both sides going and overreaching institutions to express themselves, it is an accelerationist practice. And we don't know this for a fact, but I hope that something good comes out of it. There has been the talk of how we are commodified as a society, and the funny thing is that we protest in a way that expresses that commodification of our lives, and we're also expressing it in damaging it, damaging how other people are commodified. and and I think that reaching a cycle where protesting is commodified, where defending business owners who are immediately also, in my mind, wrongly identified as oppressors. We are reaching a time where everything is being seen through very simplified lenses that are either red and blue, and that is going to definitely create change that maybe will allow us to see in more complex terms, more complex issues. And that is something that we have in many societies. In Germany, we have a wider range of political parties that people can choose from Die Linke to AfD. We have their think tanks like the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, Heinrich Böll Stiftung, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, where people can participate in and contribute to society from many different ways. And I think that in the United States, where these protests are at least happening and beginning because they have been diffused to other places, we will see changes that will allow us to see things in more complex ways and not such in narrow ways. I think that this might be one of the results of what is happening.
Comes down to discourse and maintaining discourse. So we started off with talking about the use of the puppet adversary and Texas Cats as a tactic for developing that skill and learning how to converse. And this is, I can speak only for myself in this case, but with my family and my mom's side of the family is certainly a little more let's say conservative, although I would probably use a stronger term, not recorded, when on many issues, maybe not extreme, but conservative. And it's difficult, when it's family, it's difficult when it's friends, it's difficult when it's close associates, when we get in our bubbles, no matter what the views are, to have conversations that show question and poke at the holes in all of the arguments, not just the ones that you agree with and disagree with on a fundamental level. This is a skill that has to be developed. It's something that we're all weak at some degree or another. And maybe I'd open this to Débora. How do you feel like what you've been doing in the last project, especially the ones that we've worked on together? I'm thinking mainly about the one in Mexico. How it might provoke these kind of arguments or question these arguments that maybe is specifically related to how class structure is divided in Mexico City.
Yeah, I mean, like that project kind of, I think it was like, I mean, obviously every work is personal, and like, even in the photo series recently, like I've never really used myself in a photograph or so directly. I think like, I don't know, somehow the work in this year has been touching a lot more on personal, like more and more getting closer, I guess, to like personal subject matters, or like presenting more clearly maybe like my own like why these subject matters come up in my work. But yeah, the work we presented was titled Propiedad, property, and I was in Mexico for 2 months, and I kind of like we were kind of talking about, okay, first of all, like the location of the art fair, and then obviously like the art fair renting a piece of not land, but like like a booth, a piece of booth, which then becomes like
temporary rental.
Yeah, a piece of land that you're renting for like a couple of days, 3-4 days for a certain price, and then that you are then given agency on how you want to use it, and you're allowed to also sell your products in that specific space. during that time with a very specific audience, which is the audience of the art world. And I had been doing a lot of, like I've been thinking a lot about, like barriers in society, and not necessarily, just metaphorical, but also like these issues of class that are obviously very in my upbringing, growing up in one of these gated communities, going to a private school, where like having certain privileges within society, and also being aware of those barriers in your everyday life in like a very obvious way, where have been like there was something I wanted to kind of work with, but also in relationship to obviously like the art world, and like what is like like how is art, or to whom is art accessible, or who does this artwork speak to in a way. And then like I had been walking around the city and just like looking at all these like amazing gates that are built in front of a lot of homes that were done kind of like in this kind of minimalist aesthetics that for me reference like this kind of modernist times in the city, where also it was in the 50s, where all these neighborhoods, like gated communities, started coming up. And then I found these advertisements. So like the work kind of like, in a way, I kind of like go from these kind of like personal things, but then it's just like kind of starts going on and on with research, and I guess like things that I find throughout the research. Yeah, it was, for me, it was like interesting also to be able to work in Mexico directly with like, for example, I have these recreations of these advertisements that show the gated communities like El Pedregal or Satélite, etc. And these kind of images that were used at the time looked really like, in a way, like American, and like had this very like, like aspirational tone to them, of like how to live in a city, like that relationship of the city, like you're living, because like the neighborhoods where Erasmo and I grew up were like also like these neighborhoods outside of the center of the city that you have access to because you're close to the periférico, for example, that then the periférico takes you into the city. But then we, like our neighborhoods where we were growing up, were kind of sold as this kind of like out of the city, like you're closer to nature, blah, blah, blah. But then obviously with the development of the city, they turned crazy and there was lots of traffic. Like, even though we lived probably like 10 minutes away from each other, sometimes with traffic, we could make like 45 minutes to each other's homes on Arenal, like, so I thought it was kind of like, interesting to see what was the ideal, or like the proposal of those neighborhoods, and how that actually, how they developed themselves, and how they are today. Like, so it was when we had the installation in the booth, it was, I wasn't thinking about it, but like we had a lot of people, like older, like parents, let's say boomers, that were walking around, and they were like recognizing and saying, oh yes, look at it, like we had a lot of conversations with them about how like they've experienced that development in the city. And that was quite interesting, because it was like, just like, I don't know, I think it kind of took the conversation out of just like talking about artworks, but like what the artworks made people think about. And the gate was also really interesting, because I worked with a group of workers that work in the neighborhood where I grew up. So they actually like work for making these kind of gates. And they were very confused when they came to the fair and they were installing it, because also obviously like I explained it's for an exhibition, but they were just kind of like, why would you want to put a gate in front of your artwork? And I was like, but the gate is an artwork itself, like they just so it was kind of just for me, this kind of social interactions also with the people that I'm working with, and like, yeah, are quite, I don't know, make me always think, just, I don't know, like, and they, that these like personal interactions also with the people I'm working with, like, just kind of bring up these that are not inside the art world, like also bring up certain conversations that maybe I wasn't really even expecting sometimes, that can or become interesting for me and for the work, you know.
That's important. That's a big part of the work. I was sitting and, well, not sitting, but I was active in with all this installation process, and you know, seeing how you negotiate with the workers, seeing how you corral the labor, and how you kind of explain what this is, involving them, making them aware, and kind of bringing them into this closed off community, which is the art industry, and relating, you know, this action that you're taking is pretty essential. Not that it's education, but more that it's involvement, and that's something I think most good contemporary work attempts to engage in. It doesn't just make gestures toward or point toward, as you said originally, these social issues, but involves them, you know, at some level within them, and also loses control of it a little bit. There was some loss of control in this action of involving these people. We didn't know how it was going to turn out. We didn't know if it was going to turn up on time. It almost didn't. And you take your risks, but that's also the world, and you let yourself, you leave yourself open, which is, I think, one of the most important aspects of good, socially aware, or just aware, you know, practically aware action in the world, not just in art, in anything, in design, in my case, in some design work that I do. And Erasmo, I don't know how you, how do you react on these things? How do you involve yourself, stay connected, maybe particularly during this period where you're closed off and you have to debate your cat?
I always think when I see Debora's work, such as this fence and this gate, how we were children of a generation that pretty much dedicated itself to open gates and allow bad omens to come in. And I am referring specifically to the NAFTA deal, which of course it's proven that helped Mexico become a member of the international community and strengthen its rule of law, but also terrible nourishment for Jesus perishing.
You're breaking up a little
because
bit.
of issues like diabetes and yeah. Oh,
Sorry, I couldn't hear you very well. Can you guys, can you hear him, Liam?
Yeah, he broke up a little bit in there, but it's okay now. I think we can.
Okay.
Yeah, I was talking about how our Mexican government decided to open up the gate to
NAFTA.
to uncontrolled, unregulated bad spirits through NAFTA, and how now we are suffering the consequences of these decisions by having an obese population in Mexico that is not able to withstand these diseases nowadays. And I always think when I see Debora's work on how these things are present, how we are children of a contradiction dilemma of trying to reach some sort of better modernity in our country, while also showing our vulnerability and making us lose in the most important aspects of life. And that fence that I saw there reminds me of how in Mexico we gate ourselves and we are protecting ourselves. And when we go to the United States, we think that they live in a very free world because you see their houses with their front yard open to everyone. And there is that was the idea of security that maybe they were trying to sell us that we certainly uh, never achieved because we are very different countries and we have very different populations and needs. And yeah, I just wanted to touch on that topic because I think it's relevant now that people are trying to lock up to maintain their health and keep their lives in a crisis. And it was thanks to that period of open globalization that Mexico fell in that we are vulnerable now.
Yeah. Yeah,
Certainly.
I don't think you could say that better.
And also gives a good picture of what that ideal or that constructed ideal in a very specific economic and racial ideal in the US, how it was perceived abroad, and also kind of missing all of the invisible ways where structurally within the country, within the United States, maybe there were no fences around the yards. I mean, in many cases there were, but even if there weren't, the communities themselves were fenced, or the environments or the permission involved that was on a cultural level was fenced. And that's something I can speak to growing up in precisely this environment, originally in the city, but then, my family mostly lives in the outskirts of Chicago. And they're still present and are still really tangible, even if they're invisible. And this is, despite the rhetoric and despite even progressive attitudes, it's maintained. And it's a really difficult thing to recognize spending years abroad and coming back and spending more time in the US now. It's much more visible to me than it used to be. But part of that is having this conversation and exposing yourself, not getting locked in these bubbles, which is so easy for us to do because we want positive feedback. We want to hear people like us or that we recognize as like us. And once we break that up a little bit, it makes incremental but positive and substantive changes over the course of your life. And I don't know how you feel, Erasmo, but like going back to the original point, I mean, although Deborah's work is a good point of departure, like your own work, like what you engage in as a professional. How has that changed with your move, like living in the U.S. and then in Germany, particularly through this crisis? And how has your perspective changed, and how do you interact with it?
I think that the moment that I had a widening of a perspective after working with Mexican and Mexican American communities across the United States, in Chicago, in California, in New York, Dallas, Texas, Nevada. I was able to draw a couple of conclusions. Maybe the most important one is that whenever we're making a donation to any organization, let's focus on the moral compass of its leader, because that speaks a ton. I was actually negotiating budgets and grants with leaders of organizations and grassroots organizations all across the USA. And I was able to notice that the moral compass of the leader of an organization is going to speak tons about how money is spent, how aid is provided, how passionate the volunteers and the workers of that organization are, and that is one of the lessons. And I was really deepened into the reality of horrible issues that are happening in the United States to Mexican and Mexican Americans in all stages of the immigration path, which I was glad that I could I was an all-rounder. I was volunteering in the field. I was supervising grants that they were implemented in the right kind of way. I was also sitting down with grassroots leaders. And then when I moved to Washington, D.C., I traveled for the first time through the Rust Belt. And I went to West Virginia and to Philadelphia and to even parts of Kentucky and Virginia. And that was another reality. And I saw how these two worlds cannot and probably will not speak to each other, because the way that they have been socialized from their very early understanding of the world do not have anything to do with each other. Coal miners in West Virginia cannot sympathize to whatever is happening to Mexican and Mexican American communities, because the struggles that they have of their own are also very vast and very heavy. And that was the time when I felt that all the work that I had done with Mexican communities had its limit. You cannot. I thought it really was impossible to convince everyone of the benefits of immigration, of the benefits of many issues that people are going through their own traumatic situations, and most of the time I think it will be impossible to understand. So there is a limit to dialogue, I think, and that is something that I also, it's probably one of the things that I learned by traveling the country in the working poor American and Mexican American parts of the country, and in the white working poor parts of the country. They both think, and we all think that we are at the center of a struggle. And until we do not get out of a struggle, people have a hard time sympathizing with another struggle. And dialoguing is important, empathizing is important, but I also understood that there will be a limit.
We have human
think,
limitation.
yeah, I mean, it's like, it's just that simple. I feel like living in the UK or like in Europe, I've realized how, like, of course there's a lot of issues inside this country, and like, but just to think about, like, in terms of territory, like, just think about like the scale of the US, like you're saying, or the scale of Mexico, or the scale, you know, like scale of the, just like the territory determining also like all these just like growing and growing differences within the same country. Like even in, like for example in the UK they have this whole thing about accents, how accents are so different, and like they really define you for who you are, you know, like, and it's like you actually see the scale of this country compared to Mexico, and it's just something as simple as that, you know, like those differences being marked for you, or you being different because of your accent changing depending on a region. Like if you see like, yeah, like the scale of the US and Mexico as countries, and then kind of like trying to, yeah, like unify way of thinking, or like, yeah, like empathize with problems from the south with problems from the north, or I'm just talking about in terms of Mexico, or I mean even in the US, no, like you're saying, like I completely think it's like it is impossible to try to get everyone exactly on the same track, no, and like, yeah, like also as a nation or as nations, how you prioritize or how you tackle down issues in society, like how do you, yeah, like how as a government can you do that, no? And yeah, maybe that's when we're going back to what you were saying, but maybe it's like thinking beyond just the person on top, which is the face of the government, but try to work more directly with people that, yeah, like are in your direct community, I guess.
The leader is always an important metric.
Of course.
Yeah, but I would think, you know, my gut has been in the last years, like many people in the US and worldwide, the polarization is becoming more stark and more defined, as there's a side and another side, and you're on one or the other, and it's a bit inflexible. But I find myself questioning this a lot. I'm a big questioner, even if I don't totally believe it. I do question actively this dynamic. I wonder if, are we becoming actually more polarized in our belief structure, or is it that the media, the feedback loop that we use to express our opinions is just hyped up and recirculating constantly on a constant basis? And the people being represented through this media, not just through citizenry, but also through their voice, are far more spread out than they used to be. The US, as a famous example, the Constitution allowed rights in name only to landowning wealthy white men, and now as that has been broadened in scope and application under law, at least theoretically, over time, the people who have a voice in this are louder and more empowered. I hope, that I'm not an expert. I can't speak to it. It's not this is coming from them. But what is that polarization, or is it just that now we're hearing people that weren't heard as much before?
I have an opinion on that, definitely. I think that social media has commodified our thoughts, and we act as if we had a stake and something to lose, and we try to always do some virtue signaling without being free and without having freedom of thought. And we are afraid. We are afraid of judgment, and we are afraid to commit mistakes. And mistakes are increasingly expensive. You can be ostracized from a society, a community very easily nowadays. And so that gives us really a very narrow leeway on what mistakes we can commit, even if in our thought process. A discussion, either in person or in social media, should be free from judgment and should allow to enrich ourselves with the conversation. But that part of a discussion, of a conversation, which is the way and the path, is the most important part, not really the result, has been lost because we act as if we had a lot to lose. I am a political scientist by training, and nobody will dare to question, to think out loud in social media, because that can cost you a job later in your career. So we always try to find either we censor ourselves, or we try to say the right thing. And I think that is the problem, that we have commodified our opinions, and that we are afraid, and there's too much pressure.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I like I said at the beginning, like I was very hesitant on how I should voice or not, or what to do. Like, yeah, you're constantly like thinking. And yeah, I think in a way social media gives you this like idea of freedom, but then knowing that it's all owned by a certain corporation, and that corporation is actually like collecting information from us and is selling this information, and then it's like actually questions how not just like free we are in terms of like thinking about the judgment, but also like what is happening with that information or whatever we are saying on it, right? Like, I don't know. I think that's also like another huge issue of like, yeah, just being, yeah, that these kind of like platforms actually like not being free. Like it's like a fake sense of freedom and actual, yeah, like when you're actually producing, yeah, like you're just helping out Zuckerberg basically with whatever conversation you're having on
it reminds me a little of I grew up in an environment and went to a school where a big part of the like high school training was rhetoric and the learning how to debate and taking positions that weren't your own, doing it in semi-private, not really private. You had an audience and you had your community around you, but learning how to argue a point and learning how to see the reasons for the opposite. And it's difficult because almost any situation, I can't speak to the way education is now, but at least in public, where a lot of the debate occurs now, political and otherwise, it's pretty impossible to take that kind of stance and learn from it because you are segmented almost directly into the words you use, the tone you use, the position you use, even if it's only to learn, becomes identified and categorized. And I don't, some of this is not, it's just the times, and it's not good or bad fully. It's maybe ambiguous, but not good or bad fully. But it takes a lot of adjustment, and it's difficult to make mistakes. Erasmo, as you said, I believe fully in this. People have to make mistakes. This is the only way development and human growth has ever occurred, is by making mistakes and learning from them. But now we live in a moment where it's hard to make mistakes in the same way. I mean, people certainly still do, but to learn from them and not feel bound by them. I don't want to make it a victimhood, because it's not about that, and that's exactly the wrong stance to take. But it's definitely more fraught and less simple. Well, I don't know about less simple. I take that back, but it's just different than it used to be. Well, I didn't mean to kill the conversation.
No, no.
Maybe this is a good point, Erasmo. We kind of went right into the conversation, which I love, and this is perfect.
Yeah, that was really good.
Let's talk a little bit about how do you two know each other? No. This is great. I mean, we went right into the issue, and we started off. We kind of got a little bit of a start before you arrived, Débora, and I prompted him with some questions. But tell us a little bit about how you know each other.
Oh my God, we know each other since we were 4, right?
Yes.
How do you know each other when you're 4? When you're like same preschool or something?
We went to kindergarten together, and then we studied together until high school. So obviously it's been a long time since we kind of have I don't know, I feel like in school we would have some kind of conversations like this in a much more naive. We're not saying that we're, of course, like, yeah, we're older now, but I feel like I obviously know Erasmo very well from back then, and like we have been in touch with each other, not necessarily Skyping or having this sort of conversations, but I was interested in just finding out what, I don't know, I thought like also like just trying to find someone completely unknown to me, or like that like I feel like just already having this connection, like it avoids a lot of like the complications of like starting a conversation with someone that you don't know at all, like so when like that's why I thought of Erasmo for the conversation, just also based on the fact that he's been working on that directly. So but yeah, we went to this German school together, and we were in the same class for many years. No, high school, was it high school and middle school that were in the same class?
Yeah, correct.
And kindergarten, but then I think in primary school we were in the same class. So yeah, we spent a lot of time in a very small community, also like a very, very small school, no? Like I think it was like 50 something people in our class that graduated together in high school. So yeah, it was a very specific type of community, I think.
And it was it's been great because not only we did go to the same school, but we also live close by. So that allowed for a deeper friendship.
Yeah.
We have spent even Christmas Day together because
At least 2 or 3 times, no?
yeah, we were kind of like, okay, enough of our parents. Now I want to be with a friend, and it will just take us a short drive to get to each other's house within Mexico City. This conversation for me was very special because I feel that I can speak my mind with Débora, as I have always felt. On the other hand, I don't know what she's going to say, and with close friends, you kind of already know what they have in their brains and how they're going to express about any given situation. But this is a friendship where we feel very close to each other, yet we still have a lot to discover from each other,
Mm-hmm.
and I enjoyed it very much. Yeah, we know each other from the time that we were 4 years old, and we have been always kind of kind of close. Even though we don't talk all the time, we feel like we can discuss absolutely everything with a short message without a huge preamble of, oh, hi. No, we can just step into the
Yeah.
conversation and into the question, or we have I think last time I saw you, we were in New York. I was doing field work for this organization, and you were catching up with your
Oh,
university
yeah.
friends.
We met
uh,
up for one night it
yeah,
was 2016, right before the election, right before the Trump winning the election.
correct.
And we went to this bar and had like some mezcal cocktails, no? Yes.
And it's always good to talk to Dora and pick her brain for a little bit.
Likewise. No, I'm always like, I always enjoy talking to you, and like, um, yeah, like I just feel like the way you talk about the issues and stuff, like you have like a really, I don't know, it's like a approachable way also for us, like people that don't work in that field, I think, to get a bit of an idea of what it must be like. And like I appreciate that you're not afraid to say what you think, and like, even if it might be controversial sometimes, I guess, since we were in high
uh,
school.
yes,
But
I'm
like
sure.
you're like an honest, open-minded person, so I knew we could get, like, it wouldn't be like you trying to come off as something, or like posing too much as something that you of things that you maybe don't believe in, or um yeah, you would be clear about what you think. So yeah.
That's what we were looking for. I mean, certainly this conversation was prompted by Deborah's work and also our projects together. But we both, Deborah and I, and now meeting you, Erasmo, can think you share a desire to engage in these issues verbally and intellectually and in action, more than just representing them in line with everyone else out there who wants to simply reflect the issues rather than engage with them. And I do my best. I know I'm not perfect. I have my shortcomings too, as we all do. But to actually talk about it in this way is really, now and over the last months and years, really, it's renewing to do this and to hear people talk about it like this. And maybe, Erasmo, you could tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now. Like, what are you engaged in at the moment on a personal level?
Sure. As I told you, I was in DC when I moved to Berlin. My wife, who is a brilliant person, by the way, got an offer to work at an embassy here in Berlin. And so I packed my bags, and I thought, okay, whatever is happening, I just want to be a part of your story, because it's important to learn how to be the sidekick of a story too. And that is what happened with me. And I got here for me was very important to not lose much time to find a job. I felt like it was the right thing to do, to find a job, and we were recently married, and so I didn't want to come across as someone who is not useful. I was sure that that could have consequences in the future. So I found a job in a sales team in a food delivery company, which is now a huge food delivery company called Takeaway. And it was funny because I thought this is going to be just while I find something else, and the virus came and took control of our lives, and the food delivery industry ended up being as one of the winners, as one of the winning industries during this very difficult time. So we're actually seeing lots of growth. We're actually seeing lots of positive numbers, and it's very weird to be thriving at a moment where most people are having a difficult time.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing right now, and yeah, most of the house conversations come from the very broad mind of my wife, who works in international relations and security topics, and also art promotion, by the way. And yeah, that's how we keep our minds open at home, thanks to both of us that work in very different industries and are doing very different things.
This is the nature of these kind of things, as I know that I speak to some degree for all three, that we have to engage in different fields. We're not exclusively of one or the other. We are somewhat with a foot in other areas. On my end, I have corporate life too, and I regret it sometimes, most of the time, but it also gives a dimension to what I do, and it also helps give me perspective on what I do in any facility. The part of that is having the conversations. I mean, so much of creative pursuits have been about making this image that you have to be completely shut off from these other areas, but I just don't believe that this is true. A, it's not true for me, and B, I don't believe it's true for almost anyone else. And it can be generative. So, working in an area, finding yourself at the quote unquote wrong place at the right time or whatever, or the right place at the wrong time, I don't know how it is, with this delivery company, I'm sure gives you a perspective on this that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Most definitely, yeah. Every single experience that I have had is enriching, and migrating, moving to another country, even if it's not forever, or you never know if it's going to be forever. I'm sure that Débora moved to the UK thinking that she was going to do one thing, and then just life kicks in and changes your plans.
Yeah.
So you never know if you're migrating for good or not. At least in the case of Débora and I, who have this privilege of finding jobs, finding visas. It's always a hard hit to migrate to another country. You have to really start from below, from where you were.
From zero.
And yeah, and that also has taught me the resilience of migrants that we were talking about before. They always have to make themselves smaller to fit in a new society that may or may not have their reservations, whether they want to have them there or not. So it's always tough. I cannot say that I myself have suffered any bad experiences here, but even in the own building, my wife has been yelled at by neighbors because they're just afraid of the other, and that happens a lot.
Yeah, it's very tricky. Like for me, when I moved here, because I lived in the US before, like I kind of knew obviously I spoke English, but then like when I moved to the UK, even just like learning the language, feeling like I need to relearn this language. I need to tone down maybe my American accent that I cannot really tone down. uh, and yeah, like it took me at least 2 years to feel a bit more like I was part of society in a way here. And like through having this visa, like this artist visa, like I managed to, I'm allowed to stay until 2022, and then I'm gonna try to renew it. But I mean, we'll see what happens with immigration laws here. Obviously, with Brexit and all the other political stuff going on, I don't know how, what the laws will be by then. But yeah, it is always like I feel like I always, like I still like kind of like adapting to society here and like connecting with people here and understanding other cultures. I mean, it obviously takes a lot of effort. But yeah, there's a lot of for example, like from getting your national security number, being able to open a bank account for here as a foreigner takes forever. Like I was, like I talk to my boyfriend sometimes who's English, and he's like I don't know, opening even like a savings account is like you're not allowed to as a foreigner until like many proving yourself here as a, so you're always kind of like and we are like you said, we are privileged immigrants that are moving places. Like I moved here with the support of the Royal Academy of Arts, which is like the oldest institution in the UK, and with like letters from a museum, etc., that allowed me to get this visa. Like it's not that I'm coming here in a very precarious situation, but still I think there are always many challenges when it comes to moving. So I don't know when I will want to do that again. I mean, even going back to Mexico, like I don't know about you, but like spending these 2 months for me now, I just like, I at the beginning, it always takes me like a little bit of time to readapt, and then learn how to live there. Like when I moved back from the US and stayed there for 5 years, like I never lived in the center of the city. I didn't have any idea about the art world. I had no idea, like, so for me it was like kind of again having to relearn how to live in my own city, which was really intense in many ways, because Mexico City is just so intense.
And it changes so much.
It does, yeah.
And we never experience the same aspects of a city in different ages of our life. And even if you move back again, you're gonna be in another moment of your life, and your needs are going to be different. And it just changes so much.
Yeah. But I don't know. Or like what you were saying before also about, I don't know, I feel like the way Liam and I met, just going back to that conversation about conversation, like our working relationship and friendship started from, like having conversations. Like I remember us just meeting to have coffees, and like Liam and I didn't really, like, it wasn't like really with like, oh, because sometimes like in the art world, it's like, if you're meeting with someone, it's like, okay, I have this plan, like this is what's gonna happen after this conversation, like, and I never feel like there was like some kind of agenda, which was very liberating, because then we just were also like able to just be very honest with each other and talk about issues that we cared about, and like work related stuff, but more like in terms of like ideas behind the work, not so much like a planning or etc. And then that's how we then started actually working together now. So I think for me that's like the most important thing, to be able to have these kind of relationships with the people that you work with, because the art world can also be just very closed and very insular, and not actually want to like I was saying, like have those conversations outside of it. Like we just are very concerned within the own art world system and like the openings, blah blah, like the shows, etc. If you're in this magazine or if you're in this other thing, what gallery you work with. But then, yeah, I feel like for me, it is important to step out of that world and like put myself in check of like what are the things that actually matter to me in life. You know, yeah.
Those are the most important things. I mean, it's really kind of you to say that, Deborah. And I mean, from my perspective, that's the way I work with anybody in any professional capacity.
But
it needs to
that's
start
rare.
with them. Well, regardless, but I mean, I think in Erasmo's, you know, going back to Erasmo's point about knowing the leader of an organization or the face of an organization and their ethical metrics as a way of understanding what the organization is about, more than just what's on their mission statement or what's on paper. That applies just as much to the way I look at the people I collaborate with. And, you know, this, as you described with you, starting with conversations about these topics, sometimes not about art at all, is the foundation of these relationships, because good work comes from that kind of foundation and not just, oh, this is what is being shown, or this is the trend, or this is whatever. I mean, that's the way I deal with it, and the way that I engage with it. And you know, I don't know that any other way is good or bad. It's just the way that I do it. And yeah, so I mean, to some degree, this engagement is necessary to develop a working relationship, and then deciding how and where and when to collaborate and to engage on that level. But this is too much about me. I think that this is just a way of dealing with one another, which could be I try to enact in my life as much as possible. I'm certainly, again, not perfect, and I have my deficiencies, but at least as a principle for how to deal with others professionally and personally, it's really necessary. I wouldn't know how to do it otherwise. I don't know that I would be able to live with myself if I didn't do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this I went on a little too long about myself. But you guys, both of you, any sort of last thoughts? I think we've had a really good conversation. And
I think so too. I think
covered a lot. And
we covered a lot.
We covered a lot. Like Erasmo, how would you anything you wanted to mention before we finish off?
Get a personality for your pet and start discussing these issues from different perspectives.
This is the quarantine advice. Quarantine advice.
At least, or your plant.
Your plant. Exactly.
Can also participate.
I don't know, with Texas Katze, it's always very, very interesting to hear what she has to say about all the rightist causes, and how sometimes there is a valid point to some of them, even though she's just a cat and doesn't know anything. Sometimes she has very good arguments, and it's enriching to have conversations on and yeah, put to practice the whole debate and the whole philosophy to it. It's enriching. I don't know what else to say. Beware of people that tell you that just because someone looks like you and is a politician is going to defend you. That is what people in the United States tend to think, and it is not always the best option to believe that just because someone has your same nationality, your same color of skin, speaks your same language, is going to not sell out and support the exact causes that you are fighting against. Maybe that will be my closing argument.
It's a good one.
Thank you.
Small steps are good ones. Small recognitions and building that muscle of understanding and debate and rhetoric is good for developing your own positions and engaging and understanding for a wider group of people outside your own. Débora?
Yeah, just look outside of, I don't know. I don't really want to tell people what to do, but I think it's important to stay, like kind of look outside the art world and stay actually active and like participate and engage in the things that you care about. Huh?
And have fun while doing it, like you do.
And have some fun, maybe. Yeah, try to find a way that is true to who you are and your personal experiences or where you're from, or like, I think that's very important too, to just like, speak from your own experiences and perspectives, and and just also be aware of your own limits. I think that's also something important to know. But yeah, thank you guys so much. It's been
thank you both.
Really cool to talk to Erasmo again and have this as an excuse to stay in touch and discuss beyond just our chats on Instagram, or like just to know how you are personally. But it's been really cool to have this opportunity again, to feel like I'm in a kind of classroom with you.
This was very enjoyable for me. Thank you. Thank you, Liam.
Yeah, thanks, Liam.
I'm happy that there was a catalyst to bring you both back together, and I got to listen to it. It's been really good for me, and I hope that in some way we find a way for this to continue after the talk. So thank you both very much for taking the time. I probably will end the talk right about here. But yeah, let's stay in contact. I'm going to do some editing and restructuring of everything. Well, I mean, not so much. I mean, I want to keep it as flowing as possible, but maybe for technical reasons. And I think the idea is it will be published already this weekend. So I'll keep you both informed about when and where that is. But thank you very much. And Erasmo,
thank you, Erasmo,
I really
so
appreciate
much
your intelligence and your perspective. It's great.
Yeah, thank you for letting us pick your brains and
please, yes.
wanting to participate in this kind of weird experience. But yeah, I thought personally, like, it was important to not just, like I said at the beginning, like I just didn't really want to use this time to just show images of my work, because I don't think this is like the right thing. I don't know how much I am changing anything by trying to, or by this attempt, but like for me it was important, and I knew that that it would be an interesting conversation, that we could come with some good points, and just take it outside of the common use of this kind of online presence or online actions that a lot of galleries have been doing.